"Excuse me, Miss Hartley, the CEO would like to see you in his private office." The words slipped from the administrative assistant's lips almost cautiously, as if even she didn't quite believe them. Jenna Hartley looked up from the pediatric chart she was reviewing, her hands still hovering mid-air with a pen. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. "The CEO?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The assistant gave a tight, nervous smile and nodded. "He asked for you by name." By name. Jenna's heart thudded in her chest. In the 7 months she'd been working night shifts at Crestwell Children's Hospital, she'd only ever seen the CEO, Mr. Malcolm Carrington, once, and that was in a photo on the hospital newsletter. He never came to the lower floors, never spoke to nurses like her. The pediatric wing was unusually quiet. The soft beeps of monitors and the occasional distant cough were the only sounds. But the silence at the nurses' station was unnatural. Marla, the head nurse, had paused mid-sentence on a call. Even Jerome, the usually talkative janitor, had stopped pushing his cart. All eyes flicked toward Jenna. She slowly stood up, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed her uniform. Did I do something wrong?" The assistant's brows pulled together in confusion. "I don't think so. He just said to bring your file. That's all I know." Jenna blinked. Her file. She grabbed it from the drawer beside her desk and followed the assistant down the hallway. With every step, her nerves tightened. The same hallway she walked every day now felt unfamiliar, as if each tile she stepped on led her farther into something she couldn't explain. Last week had been a blur. Long shifts, not enough coffee, a dozen patient charts. Somewhere in the middle of that chaos, she had signed a name on a clipboard left outside the staff conference room. She thought it was a flu shot form or a supplies checklist. She didn't even glance at the title. She never imagined that clipboard innocent ordinary held a proposal meant for senior medical staff only. A new hospital initiative, Project Comfort, aimed at integrating emotional care into pediatric recovery programs. The form requested names of professionals willing to join the pilot team, specifically those with a track record in child-patient emotional engagement. And somehow, Jenna had signed it. The mistake could have been overlooked, if not for the data. Behind thick walls and glowing screens, Mr. Carrington had been reviewing departmental performance reports that Monday morning. Buried in a sea of spreadsheets and trend lines, something unexpected caught his eye. One pediatric nurse, J. Hartley, consistently spiked patient satisfaction ratings. Children recovered faster. Parents wrote lengthy notes about her. She wasn't just doing her job, she was changing outcomes. Curious, he pulled her file. No awards, no complaints, just consistent, quietly exceptional work. And then he saw her name on the Project Comfort proposal. That's when he made a call, a quiet one, directly to HR, then to the pediatric floor. Now, Jenna stood in front of the golden elevator that led to the top floor, an area most nurses never saw, unless they were lost. The assistant offered a small, kind smile. "This way." The elevator doors slid open with a whisper. Jenna stepped inside. As they rose floor after floor, her fingers clenched the manila file until the edges bent. Her mind spun with questions. Had she been reported? Was this a disciplinary action? Would she lose her job over a simple signature? The doors opened to a hallway flooded with natural light. Sleek, modern furniture lined the walls. Abstract paintings hung with silent confidence. This wasn't a hospital, it felt like the lobby of a private tech firm. At the end of the corridor, tall glass doors stood open. Inside sat Malcolm Carrington. He looked nothing like the severe corporate head she imagined. Mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, and gentle eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. He stood when she entered. "Miss Hartley," he said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming." She sat slowly, unsure if her voice would work if she tried to use it. "I imagine you're wondering why you're here," he began, his tone calm. She nodded, hands folded tightly in her lap. He tapped the folder in front of him. Her file. "I was reviewing some recent departmental trends and noticed a pattern. Your name appeared on a list that wasn't meant for your role. At first, I thought it was a clerical error, but then I saw the data attached to your work, and suddenly, it didn't seem like a mistake at all." Jenna's mouth opened, but no words came. He leaned forward. "Do you know what Project Comfort is?" She shook her head. He explained. "Emotional care, integration, child psychology, empathetic recovery strategies. A team of specialists, doctors, therapists, and apparently, one shy pediatric nurse who had unknowingly signed up for it. I didn't mean to. I didn't know what the form was, Jenna admitted, voice soft and shaky. I believe you, he said gently. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't an accident. Jenna stared. There's something in your approach to nursing, he continued, that can't be taught in a seminar. I've read the letters from parents, I've seen the outcomes. You're doing something most nurses don't even think to do, and I think that matters. Jenna swallowed hard. Her mind was still racing. Miss Hartley, Mr. Carrington said, we'd like to offer you a temporary rotation on a trial basis as part of the Project Comfort Core team. You'll be working alongside senior staff, psychologists, even me, to shape this program from the inside. Her breath caught in her throat. We'll start with observation. Then you'll contribute. No pressure. Just be who you are. With the kids, like you've always been. I'm not. I don't have any special qualifications, she said quickly, terrified she'd wake up from this. You have something rarer, he said, a heart that listens. She stared at the polished floor, too stunned to respond. He stood. Take a few days to think about it, but I hope you say yes. As she left the office, she walked like someone who had stepped into a dream and wasn't sure how to walk back out. The golden elevator closed behind her, and her reflection looked different in the mirrored walls. Not because her scrubs had changed, but because for the first time someone had seen her, and not just anyone. The CEO downstairs. Whispers fluttered again as she returned to her post. Did you get in trouble? What did he want? Jenna didn't answer. Not yet, because she wasn't sure how to explain that a clipboard mistake had just opened a door she never even knew existed, and that sometimes the quietest voices carry the power to change everything. The first thing Jenna noticed when she stepped into the new conference room wasn't the sleek table or the soft hum of the ceiling lights. It was how out of place she felt. 10 chairs were already filled with professionals whose name badges included words like director, PhD, or lead specialist, and there she was, J. Hartley, unholding a paper cup of lukewarm coffee and praying her shoes didn't squeak on the polished floor. She hadn't told anyone downstairs that she said yes, not even Marla, not yet. The invitation had come in the form of a formal email the next morning, confirming her temporary placement in the pilot program. Phase 1, observation and emotional mapping. She hadn't even known what emotional mapping was, but when the email ended with a handwritten note scanned at the bottom, excited to see what you bring to this. MC, something in her chest loosened. For the first time in her adult life, someone with power had called her needed. Now, as she quietly took the last seat at the end of the table, a woman in a forest green blazer began speaking. Dr. Harlow, Director of Pediatric Behavioral Science. Her tone was firm but warm, like someone used to being both respected and challenged. Our goal isn't to add more hours or more checklists. It's to create touch points, quiet ones, consistent ones, ways to make children feel safe the moment they enter our building. Nurses, physicians, volunteers, it's all hands, even janitorial. We build comfort where trauma used to live. Heads nodded. Jenna tried to nod like she understood it all. Dr. Harlow gestured toward the man sitting beside her. Tall, salt and pepper hair, crisp white shirt. She hadn't realized he'd been watching her until their eyes met. This is Mr. Carrington, Dr. Harlow said, but I think most of you already know that. A light laugh rippled around the room, but Jenna just swallowed hard. Mr. Carrington stood and smiled gently. This program started with numbers, recovery rates, family surveys, but it's evolving into something more human. That evolution started with a name on a form, by accident. Jenna froze, and that name belongs to someone in this room. Every head turned. She felt the weight of their gazes, but none were mocking. Just curious. Curious how someone like her had ended up here. Jenna Hartley, he said, voice firm, signed the form unintentionally. But what her file revealed made us ask, what if we stopped choosing only based on qualifications? What if we started choosing based on impact? Silence. Then Dr. Harlow added, Jenna, we'd like you to shadow Dr. Shaw in the oncology wing this week. His patients are in phase 2 trials, emotionally complex, and we believe you may notice things others don't. Me, she STAMMERED. Dr. Shaw looked up from his tablet, mid-30s, clean-shaven, with a face that didn't smile often but didn't frown easily either. We've read your notes, he said simply. You listen more than you talk. That's rare in our field. Jenna didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. That afternoon, she followed Dr. Shaw into a room that smelled of disinfectant and lavender oils. 8-year-old Becca lay curled under a blanket with giraffes on it, her IV bags slow-dripping chemo. Her mother sat in a chair nearby, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Dr. Shaw introduced Jenna quickly, then went over labs, treatment changes, and prognosis. Becca's mother nodded, trying to process the jargon. But Jenna wasn't looking at the chart. She was watching Becca's fingers, tiny fingers that traced the edge of the blanket over and over and over again. She's nervous about something, Jenna whispered when Dr. Shaw stepped out. But it's not the treatment. Her mother looked up. How can you tell? She's holding the blanket in loops. That's a soothing behavior, but her toes are flexed. It means she's bracing. The mother blinked. I didn't notice. Jenna knelt beside the bed. Becca, she said softly. The girl didn't answer. You don't have to talk, Jenna said. But can I show you something? She took a blue marker from her pocket and drew a small star on the back of her own hand. My favorite nurse used to do this when I was scared, she whispered. Every time you feel nervous, just look at it. Want one? Becca looked at her, silent, then slowly extended her hand. Jenna drew the star, tiny, quiet, powerful. Outside the room, Dr. Shaw stood watching. He didn't speak. He didn't interrupt. But later, in the debrief, he said only one thing. Whatever that was, it worked. Over the next 3 days, Jenna became a silent presence on the oncology floor. She didn't diagnose, she didn't lead, she didn't suggest, she simply noticed. She noticed how 13-year-old Caleb wouldn't touch the jello on his tray if the spoon wasn't wrapped in a napkin. She saw how tiny Eliza refused to take her meds unless the bottle had the yellow sticker. And she noticed how Dr. Shaw, brilliant though he was, rarely looked patients in the eye when giving news. On Thursday, after rounds, he pulled her aside. Can I ask you something? Jenna hesitated, unsure what he might say. Do you ever get tired of being the only one who sees things? She blinked. Sometimes, but I'd rather see and be tired than miss something that matters. He nodded, quietly. Later that evening, Jenna found a folded piece of paper slipped under her assignment clipboard. Observation report. Jenna Hartley. Recommendation. Permanent seat on Project Comfort Core Team. Reason sees what the rest of us forget to look for. Signed, Dr. Adrienne Shaw. She stared at the signature for a long time, her eyes blurring. She'd come from a world of routine. Check vitals, pass meds, stay quiet, don't be a problem now. Her silence had become her strength, and she was only just beginning to realize how deeply she belonged in rooms she was never invited to. The first child she ever lost was named Aiden. She hadn't thought of him in years until today, when she saw a pair of red sneakers dangling from the bed of a new patient, the same brand, the same scuffed toe. It hit her like cold air in the lungs. That memory. Jenna stood in the hallway longer than she should have. The sounds of the hospital muffled around her as her heartbeat thudded against the past. She remembered Aiden's laugh, loud and unfiltered. He'd always asked for 2 apple juices and no jello. She remembered how he once told her she reminded him of the moon. Because you don't talk too much, but you light things up. He was the reason she became a pediatric nurse, and he was also the reason she almost didn't stay one. She hadn't shared that story with anyone. Not even during interviews. Not when they asked, why pediatrics? She just smiled and said, because kids are honest. But now, 3 weeks into her placement with Project Comfort, it was no longer just about watching or shadowing. It was about creating something. Jenna had been asked to draft her own care signature model, something personal, something that could be used to train others. The idea terrified her. She sat in the hospital library, staring at a blank screen. The words proposal, nurse-driven emotional integration plan, blinking back at her. What did she know about writing proposals or building models? She was a nurse. She cleaned ports. She calmed screaming toddlers. She held vomit trays. She stayed up all night just to make sure no one felt alone. Her eyes fell on her ID badge, clipped to her collar. J. Hartley, RN, Pediatric Comfort Team. Pilot program. That last line still didn't feel real. A soft knock at the table pulled her from her thoughts. Dr. Shaw stood nearby holding a coffee. You okay? He asked, watching her face. She nodded, even though she wasn't sure. I never asked, he said, setting the coffee down, why you became a nurse. She hesitated, then said, because of a boy who died. Dr. Shaw didn't speak. He just sat down across from her, silent. I was 17, she continued, volunteering at the children's ward. He had leukemia, stage 4. His parents didn't come much. I used to sit with him at night. He made me laugh even when I didn't want to. Then one morning, he was gone. No warning, just gone. Dr. Shaw looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. I didn't know grief could be that quiet. Jenna whispered, "That still." He nodded slowly. "It is." They sat in silence for a while. Not awkward, just honest. Then he said, "What you're building, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. Start with what you know, not what you think we want." She looked at him, surprised by the softness in his tone. "And Jenna," he added, before leaving, "don't forget Project Comfort started because of a mistake, so don't be afraid to make a few more." That night, something shifted. She stopped trying to sound like a researcher. She deleted the formal tone. She titled her document simply, "Little Things, A Nurse's Guide to Listening Without Speaking." Her opening line read, "Sometimes, the smallest kindness is a louder comfort than any medicine I've ever given." She wrote through the night, about bandages that looked like animals, about giving children colored choices instead of demands, about catching the sigh before the scream, about how some kids need space and others need stories, how grief doesn't always look like tears, and how presence, the kind that's gentle, not intrusive, can make even a sterile hospital room feel like safety. When she emailed the first draft to Dr. Shaw and Mr. Carrington, she expected silence, maybe a polite thank you, maybe notes. She didn't expect what happened next. By Friday, the proposal had circulated across 3 departments. Over the weekend, it reached the board of directors. By Monday, Jenna received an official notice. Her Little Things model would be piloted across 3 floors during evening shifts. No committees, no approval delays, just a yes. But not everyone was thrilled. Marla, her old supervisor on the night shift, cornered her in the hallway near the supply room. "I read the newsletter," she said sharply. "You've barely been here a year, and now you're teaching us how to do our jobs." Jenna opened her mouth, but Marla wasn't finished. "I've been doing this 22 years, Jenna. I've held dying babies. I've fought with insurance. I've comforted families in waiting rooms. And you think crayons and storytime are solutions? It's not about replacing medical care," Jenna said quietly. "It's about giving children back a piece of peace while they're here." Marla stared at her for a long beat. Then her eyes softened, just a little. "You're not wrong," she muttered. "But you'd better be ready. People don't always like being reminded they forgot something simple." Jenna nodded. "I know." That week, she worked the oncology wing with more purpose than ever before, and the changes began almost instantly. Kids who hadn't spoken in days began whispering. Requests for colored blankets. One teenager with recurring migraines finally opened up during a drawing session and revealed she'd been skipping doses out of fear. Parents started requesting the quiet nurse with the stars. And in the middle of it all, Jenna never forgot Aiden. Every time she saw a red sneaker or a nervous child staring out a window alone, she saw him. And instead of breaking her, the memory strengthened her. She was doing this for the kids like him, the ones who didn't have anyone else, the ones who deserved more than just survival. They deserved comfort, dignity, and joy, even in the darkest places. One night, as she walked to her locker after a 12-hour shift, she found a note taped to it. No name, just a sentence: "You're not invisible anymore." She held the note against her chest for a long time, blinking back the tears, because somewhere between a clipboard mistake and a red sneaker, Jenna Hartley had stopped being the girl who kept her head down, and become the woman people looked up to. Asterisk, she never expected to be called into the boardroom. It wasn't even a place she'd known existed until last week. It sat high on the 15th floor, behind frosted glass and mahogany doors, a world away from the beeping monitors and quiet cries of the pediatric wing. Now, as Jenna sat there in her soft blue scrubs, surrounded by executives in suits, she felt like she'd stepped into someone else's life. Mr. Carrington sat at the head of the table, reviewing a packet of printed pages in front of him. Jenna recognized the layout. It was her proposal. Little Things, A Nurse's Guide to Listening Without Speaking. But today, it wasn't just a guide. It had become a pilot model. "We've received early data," Carrington began, looking around the room, "and the results are stronger than expected. Patient anxiety scores dropped nearly 12% in the test units. Feedback from parents has been overwhelmingly positive, and staff engagement is rising. He paused, then looked directly at Jenna. We owe that to someone who didn't ask to lead, but simply showed us what leadership looks like in the smallest acts. She tried to speak, but her throat tightened. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was respectful, and for the first time, she didn't feel like the shy nurse who slipped in and out of rooms. She felt seen. But just as quickly as her confidence began to grow, something else happened. A man from HR in framed glasses, polished shoes cleared his throat. While the outcomes are encouraging, there's a question about boundaries. Nurse Hartley has been operating outside the scope of her official role. We need to clarify the lines between comfort care and licensed therapeutic practice. The words stung, even if they were spoken with a smile. Jenna kept her face still, but her hands clenched beneath the table. Carrington answered calmly, "That's exactly why we're here, to define new lines. Because this isn't just about following old structures, it's about creating new ones." But the HR rep wasn't alone. Another board member leaned forward. "I've read the proposal. It's thoughtful. But we have to ask why should a junior nurse without advanced certifications be developing protocols that touch mental health care?" Jenna swallowed before she could respond. Dr. Shaw spoke for the first time. "Because she's doing what our data says should be done. Because she's identifying distress patterns before they become behavioral issues. Because she's reaching children in ways some of us haven't in years. That's not replacing therapy, it's making space for it to succeed." The room went quiet again. Then Mr. Carrington said something no one expected. "Starting next quarter, we're creating a new role, Pediatric Comfort Liaison. It'll be a bridge between emotional observation and clinical care, and we're offering Jenna the position." Jenna's breath caught. Her mind rushed to keep up. "But I'm not qualified," she said quietly. "Yes," Carrington said, "you are. Because this role didn't exist until you made it necessary." Outside, the sky over the city was pale with evening light. Inside Jenna, something steadier than nerves started to rise, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Belief. That night, she didn't go home immediately. Instead, she walked down to the hospital's healing garden. She hadn't been there in weeks. The same bench under the willow tree waited for her. The one where she used to sit during breaks and read patient letters left behind by grieving families. She sat down and pulled a folded envelope from her pocket, one she'd never opened. It was from Idon's mom. Years ago, she'd kept it in her drawer, but never had the strength to read it now. She unfolded the paper slowly. "Dear Jenna, you probably think we forgot. We didn't. You were the only one who stayed when he was too tired to talk. You were the only one who laughed at his jokes when they stopped being funny. We saw you, even when you thought no one did." Aiden said you reminded him of the moon. "I agree. You were the only light in the worst place." Jenna pressed the letter to her heart. A single mistake had led her here. A misplaced signature, a name on the wrong clipboard. But maybe it wasn't a mistake at all. Maybe it was grace, a divine nudge, a redirection disguised as error. She walked back into the hospital with a different posture. Still soft, still quiet, but no longer small. In the weeks that followed, her new role began taking shape. She attended team briefings, offered training sessions, even helped write family care pamphlets for difficult diagnoses. The little things model was now part of the hospital's evening protocol, and through it all, she kept doing what she did best, noticing. She noticed when Dr. Shaw began to pause longer in his conversations with parents. She noticed how nurses on night shifts began using colors and choices instead of cold commands. She noticed how one child, terrified of needles, agreed to chemo only if Jenna sat with her. But one afternoon, she noticed something she couldn't explain. Mr. Carrington didn't come to the floor that day. Unusual, given his hands-on approach to Project Comfort, and when she stopped by his office with a copy of her updated notes, his assistant looked up with a somber expression. "He's with his son today," she said gently. Jenna blinked. "I didn't know he had a son." The assistant nodded. "No, one does. He doesn't talk about it much." Later that night, Jenna couldn't sleep. She sat on her couch, thinking about the way Mr. Carrington had defended her, had built a space around her when others questioned her worth. And suddenly, she realized she knew so little about him. What story was he hiding? What pain was he carrying in silence? Jenna stared at the ceiling and whispered something she hadn't said in years. "Please, if there's a way to help him too, show me." And just like that, the story began to shift, not just hers, but his asterisk. She was halfway through folding patient comfort kits when she saw him standing at the far end of the corridor, hands in pockets, gaze fixed on the pediatric mural that wrapped around the wall. Mr. Carrington never came down this early, not without a reason. Something was different. Jenna glanced around. The rest of the wing was quiet. Most of the children were still asleep or in therapy sessions. Nurses moved softly through their routines, unaware of the unexpected presence at the end of the hallway. She set the kit aside and walked toward him. "Mr. Carrington," she said softly. He turned slowly, as if pulled from somewhere far away. He looked tired, not physically, but from a place deeper, the kind of exhaustion that lives in someone's chest for years without anyone noticing. "I didn't mean to interrupt," Jenna added quickly. "You didn't," he replied, offering a small, weary smile. "I was just remembering." She waited, not pressing. He gestured toward the painted wall. A field of balloons floated across the pale blue. Smiling stars, animals in wheelchairs, and children holding hands lined the colorful scene. "My son used to love this mural," he said quietly. Jenna blinked. "Your son?" He nodded, looking down at his shoes. "Eli, he was 7. The silence between them deepened, but not awkwardly. It was thick with unspoken things. "I didn't know," she said gently. "Most people don't," he replied. "I kept it that way. Running a hospital while grieving your child, people start treating you like a charity case or a ghost." Her chest ached. "What happened?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes returned to the mural. "Neuroblastoma." It moved faster than anyone expected. One week, we were making plans for his birthday. The next, we were signing DNR papers. Jenna exhaled slowly, her hands folded in front of her. "I tried to stay logical," he said. "I thought if I just managed it like a problem, I could fix it. I focused on the data, the stats, the trials. I never learned how to just be with him." That role fell to a nurse. She sang to him, read to him. She was the only one who made him laugh. Toward the end. "What was her name?" Jenna asked. "I don't remember," he admitted. "I was too numb to ask. But I never forgot what she did." Jenna's eyes blurred. "That's why I noticed your proposal," he said. "Why? I read your file 3 times. You reminded me of her." A long pause. "You're not just changing the system, Jenna. You're giving families like mine something they didn't know they were missing." The weight of his words sank deep into her. "And now," he added, shifting the conversation, "there's something I want to ask." She looked up. "There's a gala next week," he said. "Board members, donors, people who make decisions based on polished speeches and printed statistics, but they don't feel what happens here." He paused. "I want you to speak 5 minutes about Project Comfort, about what it really means." Jenna's throat tightened. "Me? I'm not a speaker." "You don't need to be," he said. "You just need to tell the truth." She hesitated. "What if I freeze?" "Then you freeze," he said with a shrug. "And then you keep going, because they need to hear the voice that started all of this, not the polished version, the real one." That night, she stayed late in the staff lounge, writing on the back of a supply form. She tried to start big, with data, definitions, but it didn't feel right. So instead, she began with the story. "My name is Jenna Hartley, and I wrote my name on the wrong clipboard." That's how this started. Not with ambition, not with expertise, but with an accident, a mistake that opened a door I didn't know existed. The words began to flow, not rehearsed, just real. The week passed faster than she wanted. The night of the gala arrived like a thunderstorm, loud, formal, filled with expectations. The ballroom was glowing with warm light, waiters gliding between tables, donors in elegant suits and gowns, sipping wine and trading numbers like chess pieces. Jenna stood at the edge, hands trembling. Her scrubs were replaced with a simple navy, dressed, but she still felt like a child pretending to be someone else, until she saw Mr. Carrington across the room, nodding once. She stepped onto the stage. 500 eyes looked up. She took a breath. "My name is Jenna Hartley," she began. "And a few months ago, I signed the wrong clipboard." Laughter soft, unexpected. "I thought it was a supply form, but it wasn't. It was an initiative proposal for something called Project Comfort." The room quieted. I wasn't qualified. I didn't have titles or leadership experience. But what I did have was time. Time spent holding children's hands when they were too scared to sleep. Time listening to parents say the things they were too afraid to say out loud. time noticing the little things, the trembling fingers, the silent tears, the way a child grips a blanket like it's the last piece of control they have left. The air changed. She went on. About Eli, about the red sneakers, about the girl who asked for pink bandages because it reminded her of home. I didn't change lives with medicine, Jenna said quietly. I changed them by being present. And somehow, that became enough to start something new. When she finished, there was no immediate applause, just stillness, and then, like rising wind, it came loud, heartfelt, undeniable. Later, people she'd never met approached her with tears in their eyes. Donors offered to fund additional wings. A board member said, "I forgot what this job was about. Thank you for reminding me." And just before she left the ballroom, Mr. Carrington approached her again. "You didn't just speak," he said. He shifted something. She smiled, tired but full. And yet, in the back of her mind, a quiet thought stirred. The world had changed because of a mistake, but not all mistakes were accidental. Some were exactly the moment. Destiny chose to knock softly enough to be missed by everyone else, except her. The envelope sat on her locker shelf for 2 days before Jenna finally opened it. No name on the outside, just her initials, written in careful block letters. JH. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The photo stopped her breath. It was a boy, no older than 6, bald eyes bright. He was sitting up in a hospital bed, wearing a cape made of pillowcases, and grinning as if he ruled the universe. Beside him stood a young nurse, awkwardly smiling, holding up a peace sign. It was her. She didn't remember the photo being taken, but the moment came flooding back. His name was Leo. He loved superheroes, thought for Poles looked like robots, called her nurse Ninja because she could give medicine without waking him. Leo had passed away 9 months ago. Jenna's hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. "Dear Jenna, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. My son Leo was in room 317. You were the only nurse who never flinched when he asked the hard questions. You didn't lie. You didn't sugarcoat. You just sat beside him and listened. That mattered more than I can explain. The day he stopped breathing, you were there, not rushing, not panicking, just holding his hand and humming some silly song he liked about space turtles. I didn't have the strength to be in the room, but you did. You didn't just care for him. You carried him through the last days of his life with dignity, humor, and grace. That's something I'll never forget. When I heard about your project, Comfort Proposal, I cried. Not because it's brilliant, which it is, but because it means children like Leo will always have a nurse ninja at their side. Not every hospital has that. But now, maybe more will. Please use this donation in Leo's name. Help more nurses like you create comfort when there's no cure. Let love be the medicine when science can no longer keep up." Jenna blinked hard, swallowing the lump in her throat. At the bottom of the page was a check made out for $50,000, but it wasn't the amount that shook her. It was the final line, scrawled in a mother's careful hand. "You think you're small, but to someone like Leo, you were the whole sky." That night, Jenna stayed late again, not because she had to, but because something inside her wouldn't let her leave. She walked the pediatric halls slowly, stopping at every door, whispering goodnight to the sleeping kids, fluffing pillows, replacing fading stickers, picking up a dropped crayon and placing it neatly on a tray. Then she entered the break room and placed the photo of Leo on the bulletin board with a note beneath it. He believed in heroes. Let's be the kind he'd cheer for. The next morning, the hospital buzzed with a quiet kind of electricity. One nurse left a bundle of coloring books at the reception desk. Another brought homemade muffins with a note. "For the mums who skip breakfast but never skip hope." Jenna passed through it all quietly, her smile softer, her movements slower, measured, not in steps, but in heartbeats. Then, just before lunch, her pager went off. The code was unfamiliar, not a room number, but a name, her name. She walked quickly, confused, toward the admin wing. The door was open. Inside, Mr. Carrington stood beside a long table. Beside him were 3 people she didn't recognize, 2 women in designer suits, and a man who looked like he lived in boardrooms. "Jenna," Mr. Carrington said with a grin, "you're just in time." "For what?" she asked. One of the women stood. "We're from the National Children's Health Foundation," she said. "We were at the gala. We've been following your pilot program." Jenna nodded slowly. "We've reviewed your model, your results, and more importantly, the testimonies from families and staff." She pulled out a folder and handed it to Jenna. We'd like to make Project Comfort a national initiative, beginning with 3 major hospitals in different states. Jenna stared. We'd like you to oversee the launch, the man added, with a full team, a permanent staff, and if you're willing a seat on our advisory panel. Her heart pounded. You don't have to answer now, Mr. Carrington said gently, but you should know this isn't just a step forward, it's a leap. Jenna looked down at the folder, then up at the people waiting. She thought of Leo, of Eli, of the shy girl who requested pink butterfly tape because it matched the blanket from her grandma, of the clipboard, that silly clipboard. She smiled. I'll do it, she said quietly, but only if I can keep nursing 3 days a week. They blinked. I can't lead something I don't live, she added, and there are still stories waiting for someone to hear them. The room went still, and slowly the woman smiled. Deal. Weeks passed, then months. Project Comfort took flight, city by city, floor by floor. Jenna spoke at panels, trained teams, but always returned to her roots, walking halls, holding hands, hearing fears that doctors couldn't fix. One afternoon, she returned to her locker and found another envelope. Same block letters. Inside was a child's drawing stick figures in superhero capes. One had her name, Nurse Jenna, the other had wings, and on the back, in a child's scrawl, "Thank you for giving my brother a soft goodbye." Jenna pressed the drawing to her heart. She didn't need awards, or applause, or even a title. She just needed a moment like that, because in the end, she didn't change the world with grand speeches or billion-dollar plans. She changed it by writing her name on the wrong clipboard and choosing to stay.